What's up, folks? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash, and I'm your show host over here at Fall Obsession. Thanks for tuning in to another podcast episode. This week, I am back on here with our Fall Obsession production director and my good friend, Nick Powell. It's been a second since Nick and I were able to podcast together, but we wanted to talk a little bit of Texas hunting. Nick actually had some early season success back in October, taking his first whitetail buck with a bow, and a whole lot of interesting things that transpired throughout this story, basically throughout this series of events that went into him filling this tag and accomplishing this. He got to experience some stuff that not a lot of people get to experience as hunters, and I'll save it for the episode. It's very intriguing. It's very humbling, even emotional, if you want to go that far as his journey in all this. But it makes for one heck of a story and one heck of a podcast, and I'm excited that we get to share it with you guys. So we talk about that. We finish the episode out with a little bit of a summary or timeline, if you will, of how our year has gone on Texas dirt. And yeah, just a great podcast between a couple dudes here down in Texas who love to bow hunt. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. But before we get to the meat of it, I have to hit a couple of things, as you guys know, and that is our partners on this podcast. The first one being, and our flagship sponsor for this series, is Hoot Camo. If you guys haven't checked out Hoot Camo yet, I encourage you guys to go do so. They are a Texas-based company. They manufacture not just the patterns, but they are designing their own gear and everything as well. They are a brand that's been around 2-3 years now, but they're just now starting to hit the market hot and heavy. Just their goal is to be there for the blue collar hunter, just like you and me. And the way that they're doing that is they're designing products and gear and patterns that are on par with the industry leaders in gear and camouflage. But they're at a price point that's pretty realistic for blue collar guys just like you and me if you are wanting to get into a good quality set of camo. If you guys go to their website, you'll see their prices. You can compare them to those industry leaders and you'll see the difference. And I will vouch for the quality myself. I've been wearing Hoot Camo a better part of this season. I've worn it in Texas. I've worn it in Colorado. And it has held up incredibly well, not just in durability, but the warmth too. We were wearing it in single digits with a wind chill up there in Colorado, and I was perfectly comfortable in my Hoot gear. So if you guys want to check them out, please do so. HootCamo.com. Follow them on social media. And if you want to place an order, Fall Obsession 15 is the code that you guys need to use to save some money at checkout. So go check out Hoot Camo today. Next partner is Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi. They book hunts with vetted and trusted outfitters across the country. They have a large network of outfitters that Derek works with on a regular basis, and they will set you up with something that works for you. So if you're looking for that next experience, that bucket list hunt, want to change it up with something different this year, a new adventure, whatever it might be, give Derek a call. He'll work with you on all the details to get you squared away with something that works for you. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Derek Eves is the man over there. Give him a call today. The Outdoor Call radio app is also a podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV, he created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. You'll catch Fall Obsession podcast playing on that loop on Mondays, the same day as our new publications, as well as tons of other hunting shows and podcasts that you guys all know and love. So go download the Outdoor Call radio app today. It's free. And Outdoors Dan also does a couple of live broadcasts at local Midwest radio stations every week on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And if you're not local to those stations, you can catch his live broadcast on his Facebook Live as well. He shares that with everybody, so go follow him on social media as well. Last but not least, if you guys have your own hunting brand or company in the outdoor industry that you represent in any capacity, and you think that you guys might be interested in partnering with Fall Obsession, partnering with this podcast, advertising your brand through our podcast, then please reach out go to fallobsession.com/podcast, and we can talk about the details, what it's going to take to get you guys to be able to advertise in this sponsor segment that I'm talking in right now on all of our podcast episodes. We can talk the details. There's a form on that page that I gave you guys that will put you in touch with myself and our production team, and we can start that conversation. So if you're interested, go to fallobsession.com/podcast. That's all I got. We're heading over to the episode now. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast episode.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Okay, back again. Another Fall Obsession podcast, and this week we are recording with one of our own dudes over here at Fall Obsession. Our production director, Nick Powell, is back on the podcast with me. Been a minute, buddy.
It has indeed. It's been a busy deer season.
It has been a busy deer season. I've definitely been, we've been grinding away in our respective spots. A couple times we've gotten to hunt together this year, and I've been trying to grind out podcasts consistently, but one thing that we hadn't done is the two of us catching up on a podcast. I have to go back and look, but it was early season, I think, the last time that both of us were on here together. So.
Yeah, that sounds right. And I think we were on Texas Dirt, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's probably
for
right.
A podcast.
Man, we've recorded so many together. Like I don't remember which one specifically we've done in camp or
I can't either.
Virtually and stuff. Hopefully have an in-person one at some point in the near future. I'd enjoy that.
Yeah,
again.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird. Like we're recording virtually here, and the last 3 episodes we've had on the podcast have all been in-person episodes with our guests, which I don't know if we've, since the very beginning, I don't know if we've had a run of that many in-persons all stacked up like that, but we've had a few good episodes here recently like that. So I bring that up just to encourage our listeners to go back. If you haven't listened to the last few weeks, that it's worth it. We got some good content on there. So
Yeah, I've listened to all of them. It'll keep you on the edge of your seats for sure.
Yeah, some about those in-person episodes, man, they go longer and they're more engaging. I love them. It's good stuff.
That's true. Something about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, man, we want to get you on here. I know I said, I think I was recording either with you or with Todd earlier on in the year, and I was talking about how I wanted to get with as many Fall Obsession staff members as possible who had success this season, and I'm doing a horrible job of that up till now. I've gotten with a handful of folks, and there's still plenty more that I could chase down, but one thing that we haven't recapped is your season, because you were one of the first Fall Obsession guys to actually fill a tag this deer season. Not on Texas Dirt, on your other hunting property. And so I wanted to bring us around to that and talk about that. I know you might have to dig back in the archives of your hunting brain a little bit, but I want to talk about this deer season and how it's been for you.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, as I've said on the podcast before, that the other place I hunt is in Collin County, North Texas, and we've had several good deer come through that area, and Collin County's kind of infamous a little bit for big deer. With one of our own staffers, Chad Jones. Yeah. He has shot plenty of big deer out in this area, and so we've gotten several pictures throughout the years, and this year was a pretty good year as well. I don't know if our listeners remember, but I told a story last year, or maybe 2 years ago now. But 2 years ago, I went after a buck out there and took a bad shot, bad angle. He ended up living. My dad shot him the very next year, and so there's been good history out there, basically. But this season was a special one because I was able to fill a tag. And it's a little extra special because this property is my parents' property, and they actually sold it this year. But the buyers left them, gave them a year to be out because they have a whole ranch, and so that was part of the deal when they sold, was that they have a year to be out, and so that year is up in March, this coming up March. So this is going to be the last year that we get to hunt this property, and so I really felt the pressure this season trying to get it done, and so and that also made me a little less picky, I guess you could say, on the deer that I was going to take.
Yeah.
But we had, I want to say it was like August. We had 3 pictures of 3 different deer on the same camera in the same spot, right back to back, like they were all bachelor grouped together. And these were all shooter bucks. And I don't know if we're able to put the pictures on the YouTube video, but if you're watching a YouTube video, maybe Sam can work his magic and put those 3 pictures up.
I'll
because it kind of helps tell the story.
Yeah, I'll try to remind me right now.
I'll send
insert pictures, because we had a recent podcast where I was supposed to put a picture in a video and I forgot. We posted it on our social media later, but
right.
I want to make sure I don't forget. So right now, Nick's pictures are in the podcast
there
video.
They are. Yeah, I'll send them to you right after this.
Yeah.
So, but we got picked, and we hadn't gotten any pictures of big deer up until this point. And so these were the first pictures of big deer that we had seen, and it gave us a lot of hope. And like I said, this was probably August. The season started in September, end of September 29th, 30th. Does that sound right, Sam?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Something like that. So September rolls around. We've gotten a few more pictures of these deer, and the one that I shot in particular, we had gotten more pictures of more often, basically. And so come October 5th, we get a picture of them. So when the season started, we hadn't seen these deer at all from the time the season started to the time I shot this deer. We hadn't seen any pictures of these deer at all. The only pictures we had to go off of were from the months prior, for the month and a half prior. And so October 5th, out of nowhere, the deer that I shot shows up at 3:59 a.m. at the feeder that I normally hunt over. And so I'm like super pumped, like, okay, they're still out there.
Yeah.
They're coming back. They're looking for food probably at this point in time. And then he's there again the same night, but it's now October 6th, the next morning at 1:32 a.m. And then he comes back October 6th evening during the day at 6:15 p.m. And then he's on a different camera at 12:38 a.m. on the 7th, the morning of so the next morning on the 7th. And then he comes back that afternoon on the 7th at 1:25 p.m.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay. And then I don't remember exactly what was going on in early October, but I was like, okay, I have a day to hunt. Mm-hmm. And so October 8th was going to be the day that I was going to get out there. I'm pretty sure there was a good cold front that was coming through that day. And so October 8th, I get in the stand, and I was kind of torn between which stand to hunt, because I set up in the area I hunt. I have a small food plot, and I put a hang-on stand with my saddle over that food plot. And I had put corn, spread out corn in different places of that food plot. And 3 days before that, 5 days before that, on October 3rd, I had shot a doe over this food plot. And we had the same 4 does that were coming in. And the oldest, biggest doe came in finally, and I shot her with my bow.
Yeah.
And so I was contemplating on sitting in this stand, but if I were to sit in that stand, I wouldn't be able to see this feeder, which this feeder is probably, 50 yards from where this stand is, but it's super thick. And so I can't see this feeder at all. And so there's a tripod over this feeder that sits over this feeder. It's about 25 yards away. And so I opt October 8th morning to sit in the tripod instead of the stand, because majority of the pictures that I'm seeing are at this feeder, or is this deer at this feeder.
Yeah.
So October 8th morning, I think the sun came up at like 7:30 or something like that. Like that was sunrise. So legal shooting light was 7 a.m. And 7:45, I have the pit, or I'm sorry, I was mistaken. I think sunrise was at like 7-ish.
Yeah.
And then 30 minutes before that. So legal shooting light was at 6:30. So at sunrise at 7. So at 7:19, I have a picture of this deer right before I shot him. And so right after sunrise, this deer comes in. He comes right broadside, basically down the trail that we drive our four-wheeler down to fill this feeder. And he walks right down that trail. And the deer that I shot 2 years prior, I hunted out of this same tripod, but he came a different way. But having that experience helped me put a good shot on this deer, for one, and then also be patient for two, because if you're in a tripod with a bow, super difficult because you're just kind of sticking out like a sore thumb, right?
Yeah.
So this deer came. He was probably 18 yards away at the time, and I'm not sure how he didn't spook, but he looked at me several different times. I mean, straight at me several different times, and it was super cool. I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, but they say that prey animals have their eyes on their side so they can see, and that's what deer are. So they have their eyes on their side. So he would turn his head like he was profiled at me, and he would turn his head and he would look at me, but he would turn his head, but then he would slightly move his head like real slow.
He's trying to catch you in like his peripherals. Yeah,
exactly. He was trying to catch me. And so I knew, I saw that, and luckily I saw that and didn't move. Because every time I would move, he would jerk his head back around. But somehow he didn't spot me, or he wasn't too worried about it. And after about the third time of looking at me, he decided that, okay, I guess it's nothing.
Cool.
And he starts kind of trotting towards the feeder pin. So he's angled away pretty hard, or quartered away pretty hard. And so as soon as he turns away from me, I just make one big swift movement and draw back. And I put the pin a little far forward than what I should have, but I put it right behind his shoulder and let it fly. And it was still kind of dark because like I said, this is just after sunrise. So it's still like not super bright outside, but I let it fly. I heard it hit. And then I can't exactly remember how he reacted, but he acted hit. And so he ran around the feeder pin, through some brush, and then back out onto the main trail. And then he stood there for a minute and stopped, and I was going to shoot him again. But as soon as I got my bow like to where I was ready to shoot him, he kind of stumbled a little bit and then just trotted off. And I was like, okay, that's a good sign, because I wasn't sure exactly where I hit him at, honestly. I knew I put the pin where it needed to go, and I knew I squeezed the trigger slowly. Like the shot felt good when I released.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any impact. And so I was a little bit concerned about that. Like, oh my gosh, like hopefully I didn't hit him high. Like I wasn't sure exactly. So I wait probably 30 minutes after this, and I can hear him jumping through the brush. And then I thought I heard him crash. I was like, okay, that's a great sign. So I wait probably 30 minutes, get down, and I go check to see if I can find my arrow. And luckily I changed my arrow setup from 2 years ago because I got a full pass through. I think I sent you a picture of the arrow that morning.
Yeah, you did.
And I had good bright red blood on the arrow. So I was like, okay, I'm in good shape. And so, or I felt a lot better about it then. And then, so I start tracking him. I go to where he stopped in the main trail, and I was looking for blood. Didn't find a whole lot of blood right off the bat, but eventually blood started getting more and more and more. And I'm thinking, man, this deer is going to be dead right up here, because the doe I had shot, 5 days prior to that, I shot her and didn't have hardly any blood, but she went 70 yards and died. And so I'm like, okay, this is great. But I'm also, so I have good blood. I'm following blood and I'm following blood and I'm following blood. And this takes me back to 2 years ago when I shot that deer, and I had good blood there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I tracked that deer for 700 yards and then found him, and he blew at me and ran. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm expecting to find this deer laying dead. I'm expecting to see a white belly anytime now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just keep going. I keep going. I keep going. Good blood all the way. And then this deer almost takes the same path that the deer took 2 years ago. And he crosses, which is across a thicket. Basically, it's like the grass is super tall, which everybody who has ever tracked a deer through tall grass knows it's very difficult.
Yep.
And so I'm basically looking for a needle in a haystack, looking for blood in this tall grass. And it's he basically goes from one tree line to the next. And I go to that tree line, to the opposite tree line of where he entered. And I'm looking for blood of where I think he went, where I'm like estimating his path of travel is.
Right.
And so I'm walking this tree line and I'm about to give up, because this is when I'm telling you, like, I've probably gone 200 or 300 yards, and you're telling me I back out, give him time.
Yeah, it's coming back to me a little bit because, like you said, it was a while ago, but I'm remembering this conversation now. And
yeah. Like, I was texting you the whole time, and you were like, man, I'd back out, give him some time. So I was like, okay, you're probably right. You know, trying to convince myself to leave, because that's like the hardest part for me for some reason.
That's a hard call.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to walk down this entire tree line. And if I don't find anything, I'm going to back out. And so I start at one end of the tree line and I walk all the way down. And at the very end of this tree line, I find good blood again going into this tree line. So I'm like, okay, sweet. So he didn't take the path of travel that I thought he had. And so I go into the tree line. I have good blood all the way across, it's like a little creek that goes down, comes back up into another clearing. And then he goes across there. I do the same thing. I go to the opposite tree line of this second clearing, and I walk the tree line and I find good blood entering the trees. And so I follow that blood.
How far have you gone at this point?
I want to say this is probably 500 yards.
500. Holy cow.
That's a rough estimate. It might not be that much, but the last time I shot a buck and this happened, I tracked his thing on Onyx. I tracked his path of travel on Onyx, and it was 700 yards. And so I'm giving a pretty rough estimate on how much I think it is.
So 500 yards and how long at this point?
I can't remember what time. I want to say this is a couple hours.
Couple hours, okay.
That I've tracked him, and because I spent a lot of time in that thicket looking for blood and trying to figure out which way he was going. And I would find a drop here, and then once I entered that tree line, it was pretty easy from there. Like in the trees, it was pretty easy to find blood, but in the grass, it was a needle in a haystack. Like, it was nearly impossible. And so he enters the second tree line, and in this tree line, there's a really deep creek. And so, like, this is all exactly the same. Like, this is exactly where the deer went last year, almost. And so he crosses the creek, goes back up, and I'm like, if he's going up, and it's a pretty steep embankment, probably 45-degree bank on the other side. So I'm like, man, if he's going up here, he ain't as hurt as I thought he was. And so I get up, like I follow blood all the way up this embankment. I get to the top, and I just happen to look up, and I'm following good blood the whole time. And I look up, and I just see antlers laying probably 25 yards in front of me. And it's a little bit windy. The wind is good, so my wind's not blowing to him. And this is when I text you, like, I found him. Like, I see him. He's right in front of me, but he's not dead. And so I think you tried to tell me to back out, and I was like, if I have eyes on him, I'm not leaving him. And I stood there for probably an hour or so, just watching him, making sure he didn't go anywhere, because probably 300 more yards. If he would have gone further east, he would have run into construction because they're building houses all around there now. And so I don't want him to go any further. And so I'm just sitting there watching him, just keeping an eye on him basically. And he'll, every now and then he'll try and get up, and then he'll fall right back down. He'll try and get up and fall right back down. And so I'm sitting there watching him, and it's like, it's hard, but at the same time I feel relief because I know where he's at. But it's not fun watching something die and then you being the cause of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I eventually, and I don't have a good shot either because the woods are super thick. Eventually he gets to a spot where I can get a shot off, and I try and shoot. I think I tried to shoot 2 different times, and I told myself I wasn't going to say this on the podcast because it's kind of embarrassing, but I shot 2 different times and I missed both times just because there was a lot of debris in the middle, like in between me and him. And so like there was a barbed wire fence, and there was like random tree limbs hanging down and grass and all kinds of stuff. So I was like, I wanted to do something though to try and speed this process up because I felt bad. It wasn't, the shot was lethal, but it wasn't quickly lethal, you know?
Yeah,
so,
and that's what everybody wants, right? That's the goal, is
Sure.
quick, clean kills, and that's the part that's killing you, because we're not out here to, to wound animals or anything, and our
Exactly.
our listeners are hearing the vulnerable side of us as blue collar hunters, as any hunter really, and
Yeah, for sure.
we're open about that kind of stuff because this is real world. This is the kind of situations that everybody finds themselves in. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's been a few instances this year for various people that have been the case, and that sucks.
That's very
but
true.
it's I appreciate you sharing it because it's reality. It's relatable. Like most hunters listening to this podcast have, in some form or fashion, been there if they've been hunting for any significant amount of time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, I told myself I wasn't going to share it, but at the same time, it's like, it's part of the story, and it's part of hunting, really. We try to make the best shot we can. Sometimes it doesn't go our way.
Yep.
Sometimes we just have a miscalculation on what the deer, like the anatomy of the deer, basically. And that's why I told you, I'm pretty sure I told you after I shot this buck, I was like, I learned something every time I shoot a deer, like something different every time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, back to the story. So I'm here, I'm watching him, and he's facing away from me. And at first, like the first probably, I don't know, 40 minutes of me sitting here watching him, he's facing away from me, but all I can see is like his ears and antlers. That's it. So I guess there is a little slope that I could barely see him over. And so I definitely don't have a shot then, but I couldn't tell how injured he was, like how hit he was. So I couldn't see any body or anything like that. And so I didn't want to push him. So I didn't want to sneak up and then him get up and run off. And so I just kind of stayed still, kept my eye on him. And all this is going through my head super quick. And so eventually he tries to get up, and then he falls back down. I'm like, okay, and he does this 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, okay, he's hurt pretty bad. And so after a little while, he gets up, and I try to take those 2 shots to try and, put him out of his misery. And there's just too much brush. So I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm just going to sit here and watch him. It sucks, but I think that's what's best, because I don't want to push him. I can't get a shot. I'm kind of out of options, really. Yeah. And so after a little while, probably like right at an hour, he lays his head over, and I'm like, okay, that's a really good sign, because the whole time he's breathing hard, so I know I hit him good. But he lays his head over, and ultimately, and really, like, I had to step back for a minute after all this went down, because this has probably been 3 hours since I shot him. And really, that's not terrible in the big scheme of things, and other stories I've heard of deer lasting, 12, 18 hours. And so, and maybe that could just be me trying to make myself feel better, but I had to tell myself that, to kind of help me cope with it, really.
Man,
But
you were a witness. I mean, I know you tried to squeeze those 2 shots through the brush, but you were a witness to what occurs on almost every kill. And
yeah, but nobody ever sees
that nobody ever sees. And to your point, like, let's say a couple 100 yards before, you had been like, yeah, I am going to back out. I'm going to come back this afternoon. And if that had been the case, you would have just come back in the afternoon and walked up on a dead deer and fist bumps, high fives, all pumped.
I would have never thought anything of it.
Not a thought
you're
about
exactly
it.
Right.
But then instead, you're right. Like, the time frame for the blood trail you have is honestly a normal, if not accelerated, time frame for a deer that's gone that far. And yeah, you just happen to be there and be witness to it. And yeah, I never, I mean, I knew your story. We've never talked to this extent and this detail about that hunt. And yeah, that's a tough thing for a hunter to
definitely
to be witness to.
It's definitely something that I've never experienced, and I've been hunting for years. Now I don't have that many kills under my belt. Well, at least in recent years, and especially not bow kills. And this was my first buck with a bow, also, and so it was definitely an interesting experience, and one that I probably never forget. And so it was just anyway. I'll get back to the story, and then we'll come.
I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but yeah.
That's okay. And so anyways, he lays his head over, and then he brings it back up and lays it back over, and he does that a couple more times. I'm like, okay, he's not going to go anywhere. Now I come to the realization, like, he's not going to go anywhere. He's going to die right there. So at that point, I feel comfortable backing out, and I go, I think my family is gone somewhere because I'm at their place. So, like, my dad, my mom, and my sisters are all gone, but my wife and my kids are there. Or maybe they're at home, but I told them, I was like, hey, come over here right now. We got a deer to get. And so Nicole, my wife, brought the kids over. And so I backed out, walked up, went and got them. I was like, all right, by the time we get, and I hung out for a little bit, took all my big layers off and stuff, because I was sweating like a hog.
Yeah,
tracking this deer for so far. But waited a little bit longer, and I was like, by the time we get back down there, he ought to be expired. And so we packed all of us on the 4-wheeler, and we go down there, follow the blood trail, and I'm telling them, like, the whole way, I'm like, hey, because my boys are 2 and 4, for those who don't know. And I'm telling them, like, look at the blood. Like, this is how I'm trying to teach them the whole process, like, here's the blood. We're going to follow the blood. It goes this way. And I'm like, I know where the blood trail is, right? But they don't. So I'm like, do you see any more? Do you see any more blood? And so we blood trail him all the way up to where he was. And sure enough, when we got back up there, he had expired. And so I got to share that moment with them. And that was just like the cherry on top of everything. So from this being the last year to being my first bow buck to having a not a strange experience, but definitely a different experience watching him, that process that nobody really gets to see.
Yeah.
And then getting to share it with my wife and kids was just, I couldn't be any more happy with how it all played out. So, but that's not the end of the story also. So, and I don't know if I told you about this part. I think I might have. I probably did at some point. But so we get down there. We get to the deer. I process the deer. I don't process the deer, but I gut the deer. I field dress the deer.
Yeah.
the PC term. I field dress the deer with them right there just to see how they kind of react. And they were, like, all into it, which was great. And I told them, I took a page out of your dad's book, and I was like, hey, buddy, like, y'all don't have to watch. if you don't want to, but if you want to, that's totally fine. And so I started cutting on them, and they were all about it. They weren't grossed out. They weren't like, it was really cool, and kind of the reaction that you want.
Yeah.
At least from my experience.
Yeah.
But field dress the deer. They're looking at all the parts and pieces, you know, like my oldest son's like, why don't you cut his neck? And I'm like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. And so we walked through that whole process, and I'm like, okay, now we need to go back up, because and I think it's really a God thing that this happened, because I was like, all right, well, I'll take y'all back up, because they were getting tired, you know. So I took Nicole and the kids back up to the house, and I'm going to come back down and drag the deer out, right? And so come back down, I get to the deer, and I find my 2 arrows that ricocheted off of stuff. So I have my 2 arrows in this hand and a deer antler in this hand, and I start dragging, and I get over there's a piece of this barbed wire fence that's in between us laid down. And so I drag him over that barbed wire fence, and I had my dog with me. He's right over there laying on the couch. And I just hear him yelp super loud. I mean, like he just got hit by something. And he's freaking out, going in circles in front of me. He takes off, like tail tucked between his legs. He takes off down the bank. And I'm just standing there like, what happened? I'm thinking he got into some briars or something like that. I'm like, what happened? And about that time when he takes off down that bank, it feels like a knife stabs me right here in the hand. And I throw my arrows, and I look at my hand, and there's a yellow jacket stinger in my hand, and it is just pulsing in my hand. And so I'm like cussing up a storm, and I pull it out. Like I still have the spot where he stung me. I pull it out, and I'm like shaking my hand, and I can just feel the whatever they have in their stinger. I can just feel it like spreading to my fingers, spreading to my wrist. My thumb is pounding. All of a sudden I look back, and there are ground nesting yellow jackets all over my deer, and they're buzzing around me, landing on my sleeves and stuff. And I just throw everything, and I bolt down, like drop the deer, and I bolt down the bank. And I get down in the bottom of the creek, and there's still a couple of them buzzing around me. And I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
So I go back up, make it to the 4-wheeler, and I'm like, dadgummit, like what else could happen? You know, like, and I'm just like, what am I gonna do? Like, they're all over my deer, and because they're stinging the deer also. And I didn't see it at first, but there's a hole, like my deer's laying where I drug the deer across was a hole in the ground underneath a root from this big oak tree. Mm-hmm. Didn't even see it. Wow. But they're all over my deer, stinging my deer, and I'm kind of glad, because if the deer hadn't been there, they would have been all over me. Yeah. And had I start dragging that deer out with my family there, who knows? Like my boys could have gotten stung or whatever. So that's why I mentioned earlier. I was like, it had to have been a God thing that you know, that we decided to take them up first and me come back and get the deer. Yeah. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? Luckily, my dad keeps a can of wasp spray in the 4-wheeler. And so I took that thing back over there real slow, walked real slow up to the deer, real calm. And I just emptied that can on that hole, sprayed my deer down, emptied that can on the hole. Dude, I was like, screw y'all. I'm getting this. This is my deer. And I emptied that can. I was like, okay, grab my arrows. And I grabbed my deer, and I freaking take off down. Because also the deer is belly down, right? And I had field dressed him, and I could just hear him up inside the body cavity. And so I knew as soon as I started pulling this deer, if I were to start dragging it again, they're just going to freak out again. And so I knew I had to be fast. And so I grabbed all my stuff, grabbed the antler, and I literally just barreled off with this deer down this 45-degree bank, down all the way down into the creek. And luckily they didn't follow me, because I guess I hit them good enough with the wasp spray. But
holy cow, man!
It was just like, I could not believe that actually happened. I couldn't believe it. Like I've lived out there for 20 years.
Yeah.
And like my parents have lived out there for 20 years. I grew up there. Never once have I run into ground nesting yellow jackets out there.
Wow.
Until that day. But all that's to say, if that's the only thing that went bad, I can't complain much. But
crazy.
That's the whole story.
That's crazy. One thing
Pretty wild
after
story.
another. Wow.
Yeah.
That's all. Wow.
So
is I'm looking at you in the podcast video here, and our viewers, if you're watching on YouTube, will see, is the buck behind you him?
That's him. Yep.
That's what I thought. I hadn't seen that in your backdrop yet on any of our videos, and I noticed that. And, yep, that's him.
Yeah, I'll get a little closer look.
He's got some mass, man.
Yeah.
He's heavy.
I mean, you can tell.
For a Texas buck, he's heavy.
Yeah, and that's kind of what these Collin County bucks are known for, is how massive they get.
Yeah.
So he's only an 8-point, or I guess a 9-point, because he's got a couple little, I don't know if I'll try to, got a little sticker right here off his left eye guard, but he scored 126, I think, was what our gross scored him at. And so he did pretty good. Not bad for a first bow buck.
No, dude, that's a good deer. Nice, heavy 8-point. A lot of character to him.
Who doesn't like heavy 8s, you know?
Yeah. For
And
those,
he's also got some velvet
I noticed
left over
that.
on him.
Yeah,
So that was pretty
I
neat.
remember that from the picture. I see it now. Yeah, for our listeners that are tuning in, if you guys aren't watching the podcast video, at least head on over and check out this portion where Nick pulls this thing off the wall and shows y'all, and I'm sure we'll post a video, a snippet from it on our social media too. That way you guys can see it. But it's an awesome deer. I like the Euro turned out good too. So
yeah, I got him back super quick, I guess, because it was early season.
Yeah.
The guy I took him to, he wasn't very busy, and so I think I got the meat from him like in a few days. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days, and then I ended up getting the mount back in a week and a half. So
I remember
worked out great.
When I shot my pronghorn that one year, I shot him like at the October 1 or something like that, and I took him to the taxidermist when I got back to Texas and everything, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're about 11 months out," which in Texas is pretty common down here.
Yeah,
like, okay, cool.
Sure.
That was beginning of October. They called me in February. Hey, your pronghorn's ready. Your shoulder mount. I'm like, oh, that was not 11 months. That was fast.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I don't think that's going to be. My mule deer was a little later in the year this year, so that's probably not going to be the case for me this year. Probably got to wait a little.
Yeah, that's true. Are you shoulder mounting the mule deer?
I am. Yeah. I decided to do a shoulder on him. Not to deviate off of our Texas talk here, but that's
all right.
Just with the experience and everything that I had, and even though he's no just monster record book mule deer, it's my first, and the story and everything that goes with it, it's nothing that'll replace it. So I'd rather fork over a little extra money right now and have that memory captured forever on the wall. So
yeah. I was hoping you would, but I had, like, all of my deer mounts are shoulder mounts, and so this was my first Euro, and so I thought it'd be something different.
I think my personal standard, at least, like all these behind me in the podcast video, these are all bucks from growing up with my dad. They're either mine or his that we've shot, and I'm sure people watch the videos, they're like, why is that tiny little one that's over my shoulder here? Why is that on the wall? That's my first buck with antlers. That's why that one's significant, and it's a cool story to go along with it.
Yeah.
But, anyway, that's from hunting over the years, and we did the plaque mounts, and my wife and I redid them
those.
And made them all uniform a couple years ago and everything. But
turned out good.
Yeah, I've always said, like, from this point forward, like, those old memories are all captured there together. From this point forward, I think my standard is going to be like that 140, 150 mark. Anything under that, I'm just going to do a Euro on. Anything over that, I'm, considering a shoulder, or these significant trips, like a mule deer or something that I don't get to, that aren't normal for me. That's
For sure.
Those are the trips that I'm thinking, that at least needs to be considered for a shoulder mount, in my opinion.
Oh,
so
absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page.
So,
but it's funny also, I have another picture that we can show, because I shot my deer on October 8th, and it was probably, October 15th. I'll send you this picture to put on the podcast video as well.
Yeah.
But it's another picture of a big deer over the food plot that I have my hang-on stand on. Big 10-point deer walks through that food plot at night or super early in the morning a week later. And so I was like, of course that would happen. But with that being said, I couldn't be more happy with with my buck and how it turned out. So
no, the story and the experience, as unique as that was, as hard as that was too, that in hindsight, in the rearview mirror, it makes it worth it.
For sure.
Yeah, I can relate. As I mentioned in a recent episode talking about our mule deer hunt, I didn't kill the biggest mule deer in the world, and I certainly, after I shot him and I was still there for 3 more days, I certainly saw bigger mule deer later on, but honestly, I don't know if a single one of them was playable, and if it was playable, it wouldn't have been as intense as the one I got. So it
no doubt
it made it worth it. But man, I know, like, we've been talking about this experience you had out there in Collin County, but I want to shift over a little bit to Texas Dirt, where we both are. And for listeners who may be new to the podcast, we have a hunting show, a series on Carbon TV called Texas Dirt, and we're in season 3 right now, is the episodes that are being published. But that's where you and I both hunt out there.
Yep.
Us and our dads have those 807 acres out there, and again, we talked earlier before we started recording, I think, about how I've kind of given, spotty updates here and there throughout the year as I podcasted with random people when applicable. But again, this is our first time getting back together on here in a while. And at the time we're recording this, general season is coming to an end. I think we got a week or 2 left, probably about a week now, I guess. And then we got a couple weeks after that, a late doe season. I don't know if I'm going to make it out before general closes. I know I will be making it out in the late season, hopefully to fill a couple doe tags, finish off the year with some meat in the freezer. But I wanted to talk to you about some of your experiences out there, and obviously they overlap with mine. And a good icebreaker for that, I think, is I want you to talk about, you got him on camera first, but this buck out there that you nicknamed Palmetto. We've referenced him. We've referenced him on the podcast just briefly before, I think. And then no, it was you, and you had the last episode of Texas Dirt that was published, episode 3 at this time in season 3. And in that episode, I think, is for the video series when folks got the first sneak peek and some trail cam pictures of this buck. So talk about this buck, talk about Palmetto, and you don't have to go crazy detail with some of the stories, but I want to at least give people kind of a timeline of our journey out on Texas Dirt this year.
Yeah, for sure. So we started getting pictures of this deer. I'm trying to remember when it was pretty early, like when it was still super hot outside. I don't think it was quite August, but mid-September.
Yeah, I was going to say
probably.
The episode 3 of the video series was like middle of September, like September 17th or something is the date that you guys were out there filming that episode. And you sent me, for the edit on that episode, you sent me some trail cam pictures from around that time, and those were the first trail cam pictures you were getting of this joker.
Yeah, so we were getting super consistent trail cam pictures from this deer. And I'm not 100% sure also like where he was coming from. But he was coming to one feeder particularly. And this one feeder at the time we were getting pictures of him only had a setup for a rifle setup. It only had a stand set up for 100 yards away. But Sam and I are bow hunters, so we were hunting with bows during bow season.
So rifle setups don't work.
Right. 100 yards is kind of far for a whitetail. But so there's around this feeder, and I'm trying to make this quick because I'm going to have to leave here and pretty soon. But
yeah, we'll make it quick.
So
you made a couple plays on him. You made a couple plays on him throughout bow season. Yeah,
so like I've seen him in person twice. The first time was a like makeshift bow stand in some brush, that like some briar brush that you can see through. But it was pretty thick, but you could still see movement through it if you needed to, which I think was my downfall when I'm now that I'm thinking, or like when I thought about it later. But long story short, he comes in with two other smaller 8-point bucks. They come in a line. So one comes, then Palmetto comes, and then the third one comes. And they all come in, not worried about anything, dude. And I have him dead to rights at 17 yards.
And this is a 150, 160 inch deer. This is the biggest deer we've ever seen on Texas dirt.
Yep, that's correct. And he's 17 yards from me. And the third deer, and I'm in perfect position too. Like I was standing. I knew kind of what time he was going to come in. They were going to come in. So I was standing up, bow in my hand, leaning against a tree, covered in brush, and I cleared out a shooting lane maybe a week or two before that. When me and Nicole went out there, that'll be a future episode of Texas Dirt. Mm-hmm. Cleared out a shooting lane for the feeder, but my view of that shooting lane could only see the right half of that feeder pin. And so he comes in from the right, and I have my bow in my hand. I look down, and all three of the bucks are right here, probably 25 yards from me through the brush. I look down real slow, clip my release on my D-loop, and I look up real slow, and that third buck, that smaller 8-point, had me pinned. He knew something wasn't right in those trees. But the other two had no idea. And so all I needed was for that deer to leave me alone, because he moved all around and just kept looking at me. He never blew or anything like that, but he knew something was up. Yeah. And so, but I also needed Palmetto in the right spot. And so he had jumped into the feeder pen, hung out, of course, most of the time on the left side of the feeder pen that I don't have a shot at. All I needed him to do was walk back to the right side, and for that little buck to leave me alone. The little buck would walk behind some trees. I thought one time he was going to leave and I was going to be in good shape. So Palmetto is working his way back to the right side of the feeder pen. He's eating corn. So he's going real slow. And so I want to be ready for when he gets there. And so I'm leaning backwards on this tree with my bow in my hand. Like all I have to do is raise up and draw back. So real slowly, I lean up off of this tree, and a piece of my jacket gets stuck on the bark. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of makes a small sound. And as I lean up, and the deer that had me pinned, he was like, "Yep, that's not right."
All he needed to hear. Yep.
That's all he needed. He takes off. Palmetto looks directly at me. Like it was like he was looking into my soul. He looks directly at me through in the shooting lane that I had cut, and I'm just staring at him, and he stares at me, gives me one of these, like he looks at me, gives me one of these, and then he's gone. Yeah. And they weren't sure like what I was, because I was camoed out head to toe.
Oh yeah, but it was enough.
But it was enough for them to know, like, yeah, this ain't right. Yeah. So they hang out like back in the brush for 3 minutes, and then they ended up just trotting off. Yeah. But it was this close. I was this close to shooting that deer. And this is probably mid to late October.
This is
that happened.
Yeah. This is around October 15th or 20th, in that ballpark right there. Yeah. And And we were trying to figure out, like both of us, this deer is we're only getting him at your spot, at one of y'all's stands. But we're trying to figure out like where's he coming from, and to make a long story short, you're walking trails, you're trying to find sign. I think you said you actually put eyes on this deer when you were scouting another time. So we felt like we had an idea on where his home range was, and then he stopped showing up on cameras on your end, and I think it was October 29th. I went to the camp stand to pull the card. And the camp stand is a location literally 300 yards from our campsite on Texas dirt, and we have an episode called the camp stand where you guys can see what we're talking about. But I go to pull the card October 29th, or it's like October 30th, but October 29th, the day before, boom, 9 a.m., there he is, 300 yards from the camper. And it's like, this deer moved. And then we start getting pictures on him on a third location, another one of your stands. So which is
kind of that third location is kind of in the middle.
Yeah, they make like a triangle. They make like a triangle all on our property. And at that point, you and I are like, dude, this is a done deal. Like, this dude is making a lap. He's making a loop. Every couple days he's showing up at a different one. It's like, it's only a matter of time before one of us kills this deer. And we were seeing him. Again, just for time's sake, I'll summarize it. Throughout the month as we head into November, we start getting pictures not just of him, but of several nice bucks at various locations across the property. I had the Big 8 on the south side. There was Old Tall Boy is another nickname that we gave one of them. There's another buck that's still out there right now that just he was everywhere. He's showing up on almost every camera across the whole 800 acres.
It feels like every feeder he was showing up on. He kind of looks like a mule deer a little bit.
Yeah, he has some similar characteristics. You're right, he's not. But yeah, it's like we were seeing many shooter bucks, and we're thinking, man, it's on. This is gonna work. We're both killing studs this year, one way or another. There's no way we don't. And then it was just like the anticipation got up here, and just crashed and burned. Because I remember it was you, me, and my dad that were all out there, and it was November 15th when I shot the buck that I didn't recover. It was not palmetto. It was from the camp stand. It was another just really good 8-point that just showed up. We hadn't seen him before, to my knowledge, really, before the rut.
And we've scoured our trail cam pictures and never seen this deer before.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sending Sam pictures. Is this him? Is this him?
Well, and then you have me. And I talked about this too in 165 with Todd, because Todd and I actually podcast and we talk in detail about this buck that I shot and never recovered. So if you want to hear that story, go listen to 165. But we talked about it in that about I don't know. It's just it was so weird, this buck that we had never seen before. And I don't know. We've been exchanging. I failed. That's where I was going with that. I failed in that the one moment that I turned the camera away basically to return a text from you. Later in the morning is the one moment that buck came out, and I'm trying to get the camera back on him, and it happened so fast. Like, screw it. I'm a bow hunter first. I'm gonna kill this deer, and that's why it's not on video. But so we had all that, and man, that's. For me, I know you've been back out there trying to grind away. The rut hit, and when it went away, everything just dwindled down. And since then, we have had the worst time, all four of us out there, with feeders not working, getting clogged up, bogged down, cameras not working. It's just, since then, it's been a month and a half. It's been 6 weeks of just problems out there. And
no deer.
And the deer have been, like, they'll show up for a couple days. They'll be all over the place, and then boom, they dwindle back down again. They're gone. The camp stand is one of our most consistent stands, I think, just because it's the newest equipment we have out there. It's the newest feeder. It's the newest, stuff. So it works the best. I think we're having some mechanical issues with some feeders now, and it's just we'll talk about that in the video series. But all it is to say, if I can make it back out there for a day before general closes, I will take a crack at a buck if it presents itself. And which is interesting because I know I told you after I shot that buck, it's like I don't feel right shooting another buck. You know, you had a deer you sent me pictures of from the camp stand show up. We had like 2 or 3 pictures of him one day. And again, to your point, you're sending me pictures. Is this him? Is this him? No, that's not him. That's not him. That's not him. This deer that you sent me, like a 90% match for this buck that I shot, as far as how this deer looks in body size and how, like, his antler build. 90% match, I'd say, based on what we can see in the pictures. The only thing missing is we can't confirm an arrow wound on this buck. And like, out of all the deer we've seen, man, it looks the most like him, and it's the most likely to be him. Seeing that deer show up, again, there's a small chance it might not be him, but seeing that deer show up and then the confidence I just regained as an archer up in Colorado, I don't know. I'd take a crack at one if I got the chance. And so if I can, I'll get out there. And like I mentioned earlier in this episode, certainly I'm going to be out there for 2-3 days in the late season to try and fill a couple of no tags and have some meat in the freezer to finish out the year. So that's the quick summary on where we're at on Texas Dirt this year. A lot of anticipation built. And not a whole lot has come out from that. I guess both of us haven't killed a deer out there. My dad did shoot a doe early in rifle season, so he's got some meat in his freezer from Texas Dirt this year. I know he's going back again.
My little sister also killed a doe out there.
That's right.
But other than that, it's been pretty quiet out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, we as we've talked about over the past couple 2-3 years, like, we learn something every year that's new out there, you know, and it's a process. This year, I think this year definitely got my blood pumping, just because of the quality of bucks, the improvement that we saw from last year to this year. And I know we're taking some pages out of Chad Jones' book and Mike Teepe's book as far as like the mock scrapes and some other stuff that I think we're going to hit hard out there next year. I know my dad has some interest in trying to do some food, you know, even if it's just a quick, you know, hey, till it up real quick, throw some seed out, see what happens. Just a quick down and dirty, you know, food plot toss. Try to get some stuff like that going out there. We have some... We're going to keep grinding away at this. You know, it's been a lean year as far as what's come out of the woods with us. But one thing that you can't replace, obviously, is the experience and getting to learn these deer even more. And, in my opinion, be better bow hunters and better deer managers, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, because of all that's happened this year. So. Yeah,
no doubt. Couldn't have said it any better.
Well, man, I know you got to run, but appreciate you sitting down with me and knocking out another podcast, and we'll have to hit it up again. I'll get with you later, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe there's a chance for us to hunt a day together or something before the season ends, but we'll take a look at it. I'm
trying to convince the boss to let me go out January 5th. I didn't realize that it was the season ended on the 7th, so I'm gonna try and go out there the 5th and do a day hunt.
Yeah.
See what happens.
I'm looking at the 6th or the 7th, maybe, if I can squeeze out there for just a day, because I work the 8th and the 9th, and then after that I'll be going out for the late season, you know, to finish it out with some does. But that's where we're at. So, well, we'll wrap it up for our listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Another Fall Obsession podcast in the books. If you haven't already, wherever you're listening to this episode, hit that follow and subscribe button. That way you guys get a notification and know whenever we drop new episodes, and you guys can tune in. We still have a lot, even though hunting season's winding down, we have a lot of good podcasts on the schedule and on the books coming up, so I don't want you guys to miss any of that. But thank you guys for listening. Hit up the socials, hit up the website, pick you up some apparel. There's some sales going on, or have been. There's always a way to save some money on Fall Obsession products. Nick's rocking one of our hats. That's the leather patch hat, so that hat needs to come back. It's out of stock right now, but we're bringing it back, so pretty good stuff. But anyway, thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys. We're back again next week for another episode, and I'll catch you then.